Actually, the last thing I have talks a bit about unintended side effects.
Okay.
But let me address the one thing that often comes up, and that is that when we talk about education, and you may agree that generally it's good to improve oneself through education, but that's something normal. It's often said, well, yeah, it's different because it doesn't affect your biology, whereas these drugs or working with your genes would affect your biology. Well, again, that actually illustrates what I said about getting your science and facts straight, because that argument displays a total ignorance of how education works. Because how does education work? You're sitting in a classroom, or maybe you're sitting here, if this has any educational value. I hope it has some. You're getting sensory inputs that are being processed by your brain. Education isn't some kind of mystical process where suddenly you get this knowledge, right? We're biological creatures. And what happens when you go to a class, you listen to a tape, watch TV, if it's an educational program, is you're getting something that affects your brain, your biology. So the idea that education, as it's normally practiced, is okay because that's normal somehow and doesn't affect our biology, whereas these drugs would, that's just preposterous. There are different ways that affect our biology, but they both affect our biology. So I think that argument is a non-starter. Okay, maybe the next slide. Another argument against enhancements is, well, gee, it's just somehow wrong, because, you get this illustration example. So let's say we take a pill that would increase our cognitive abilities so much that we could study and digest a textbook on physics within a week, right? So that, instead of going through a year of study, you can get it done that much quicker. And Leon Cass, who in the United States was on President Bush's Bioethics Council, is generally known as a technophobe. He actually has opposed every new technology that's coming down the pike. For example, he said that in vitro fertilization was dehumanizing, and any babies born from in vitro fertilization would be shunned by society and what have you. Well, that was another prediction that turned out to be true. But his argument with enhancements is, well, gee, it's horrible because what it's going to do is take away our ambition and our drive, right? Because you take this pill, well, you're not going to have any ambition anymore. You're not going to want to do things. Well, why? Does that argument make any sense when you think about it? Just because you learn something quicker and maybe can master a skill quicker, why would that take away your ambition to do things? Again, if we look to history as a guide, that hasn't seemed to have happened. Think of all the technological advancements in the last few decades that have enabled us to do things much more rapidly than our predecessors. Computers, right? Have people lost their ambition because we now have computers, or lost their drive? Maybe you've lost your hard drive from time to time. That's a real bother. But people still want to do things. It's just we can do them a lot better. Better in the sense that we can get things done a lot more quickly than we could before. We could send emails around the world. We can do calculations. They help us do things. Doesn't mean we still don't want to do things. So, that argument that somehow we lose our ambition or our drive is just ridiculous. Because even if you mastered the physics thing, unless you're just doing it for fun, you still want to apply that knowledge. You still want to have some sort of achievement, right? But then, of course, that leads to the next argument, that somehow it will cheapen our achievements. That if, in fact, you get these pills or you're able to manipulate your genes to give you this increased intelligence or increased physical abilities, well, it's somehow demeaning because, it's just not right somehow. And they often point to athletics. And they say, well, look at athletic competitions and what we think of athletes who take steroids. And they say, if we're consistent, we should have the same approach to enhancements in general. I said that we have to check our principles for consistency, so that's a valid point. If, in fact, athletics can be compared to life in general, but can they be? Athletics are a carefully circumscribed set of human activities. But not all of them. I don't think life is a game, right? I enjoy athletics, but it's really just a subpart of life. And why are we so concerned about steroids or other drugs that may enhance the capacities of athletes? It's because we want the games to be fair and competitive. We get more enjoyment out of it that way, right? Because no one wants to see, a football team. I address the American audience, I would say the New England Patriots, but they're football in Canada, sorry, I don't know the names of the teams. Let's say the equivalent of New England Patriots, or where the best team is in Canada, playing the equivalent of, like, the class from kindergarten, right? No one's going to pay $500 a ticket to see that game because it's not, it's no fun, it's not competitive. So we want competition. So we have all these rules, and it doesn't just apply, if you think about it, it's not just drugs, but there are rules about what equipment you can use, right? In the Beijing Olympics, for example, there's a lot of controversy about swimsuits. There's certain people that have too much advantage because the swimsuits are made of certain fabric, they might be faster in the water, and this and that. So all these sports have these different rules about what you can use, not just going to the drugs that are in your system, but what type of equipment you use, because we want the proverbial level playing field. But that's not the case with life in general. Because let's think about certain examples. People get prizes, Nobel Prizes, for example, for achievements in chemistry, physics, what have you. Do we not award prizes to someone who's made a new discovery because, hey, well, this person had a privileged education, right? Went to Stanford or whatever, or Princeton, got a PhD, got a government grant, was supported by 1,500 researchers, had all these research at their disposal, and we said, wow, we can't give a Nobel Prize to that person. It was a stunning breakthrough because they had all these special advantages. And we don't say that. Because we're concerned about what that person has done that may in fact help us. And in fact, if we give enhancements to people, and these people have enhanced cognitive abilities, and are able to provide services and products to society that we might not get otherwise, is there a problem with that? And I don't think it necessarily cheapens their achievement. As I said, we give Nobel Prizes worth a lot of money, a lot of prestige to people who have a lot of advantages over people who are just working on their garage. So the fact that people have advantages, I don't think will necessarily cheapen achievement. So I don't think the athletic, the comparison to athletics doesn't really work, because as I said, it's just a part of human life, not the whole of human life. All right, so let's go on to the next thing. That's, for example, people who've been on steroids. One of those is Barry Bonds, one's the Hulk, I'm not sure which one. Anyway, okay, next slide. All right, so we've been talking about enhancements that people might choose for themselves. One of the other arguments against enhancements is, well, even it's okay to have enhancements for yourself. What we want to avoid is choosing enhancements for our children. That's just wrong. Right? There's just somehow something horrible about it. You've heard talk about designer children, and it's usually used in a pejorative sense. Designing a child, just something bad about that. And Michael Sandel, again, someone who's on President Bush's Bioethics Council, actually regarded as one of the more liberal members, which shows you how stacked that council was, wrote a book called The Perfect Baby, in which he basically just the 150-page screed or tirade against using technology to perhaps give your children certain enhanced capacities. And what his argument came down to was a very notable passage. He says, if in fact we try to, either through drugs or genetic manipulation, give our children certain capacities they may not have otherwise, then these children will no longer be creatures of God, nature, or fortune. Somehow he thought that was a decisive argument, because he repeats it like 3 or 4 times in his book. Well, first of all, let's examine that. No longer creatures of God. Well, of course, I don't think there's a God, but even if there were, how do we know the deity wouldn't be in favor of enhancements? I don't think there's anything in the Holy Writ anywhere that says don't use a drug to improve your children's capacity. I think that argument is ridiculous. How about nature? No longer children of nature? Well, that's kind of strange, isn't it? Because to my knowledge, if we're talking about drugs, they're based on chemistry,